Hi, everyone. Welcome to the GoldFish Report. I'm your host, Louisa. Today is Friday, June 8th, 2018, and this is our weekly Country Roads with Winston Shrout. And we have Winston joining us. How are you, Winston?
Well, doing fair to middling, like they say.
I hear you. I hear you. I'm under the weather. I'm not feeling that good, so um, I'm going to let Winston do most of the talking today.
Oh,
We're going to,
gee. It's going to be a short report.
for a change, right? No, today we're going to talk about the justice system theft of people's financial resources. And so this should be very interesting, Winston.
Oh, yeah. Now, before we get started, I thought we might, start a little bit of humor just to kind of get everybody in a good mood. Because some of the stuff we're going to talk about, pretty nasty, dark stuff. Anyway, we'll have a little chuckle to start it out with. Maybe, you know, people might enjoy that a little bit. So I've got some, let's see here. Let me get the screen share going. Whoops. Okay. Here we go. Is that up?
Yes.
Yeah, this kind of little, satire here.
Oh,
This
good.
he says it was a tough year. He says, but I made it. He said the economy is so bad that I got a pre-declined credit card. He says I ordered a burger at McDonald's, and the kid behind the counter asked, "Can you afford fries with that?"
Oh no. Oh no.
Yeah, he says CEOs are now playing miniature golf.
In their offices, right? They can't even leave.
Yeah, it says if the bank returns your check marked insufficient funds, you have to call them and ask if they mean you or them.
Yeah, right. That's true. It's true. Deutsche Bank's on the fall now.
Well, that was the purpose. I mean, they did that on purpose. A couple of years
Yeah.
ago, they were transferring all the derivatives to Deutsche like
Right.
idiots. They took them.
Yep.
They're going to crash Deutsche, which is important.
Mhm.
Anyway, getting back to the humor, it says Hot Wheels and Matchbox stocks are trading higher than General Motors.
I love those matchboxes. When I was a kid, I used to play with them.
Yeah. Anyway, it says McDonald's is selling the quarter pounder.
The quarter ouncer.
Quarter ouncer, I mean. It says parents in Beverly Hills and Malibu are firing their nannies and learning their children's names.
Learning their children's names, that's good.
It says
Oh, that's
a
funny.
truckload of Americans were caught sneaking into Mexico. Here's one. People might remember this. It says Dick Cheney took his stockbroker hunting. Shot him.
Yeah, I know.
Says Motel 6 won't leave the lights on anymore. Here's one that's going to apply to some of the things we're talking about today. It says the mafia is laying off judges.
Oh my goodness. Oh
Yeah,
boy.
it says British Petroleum Oil laid off 25 congressmen.
That's that's why it's funny because the irony of the truth is in there.
Yeah. Says Congress says they're looking into the Bernie Madoff scandal. Oh, great. The guy who made 50 billion disappear is being investigated by the people who made 1.5 trillion disappear.
There you go.
That'd be a good investigation, wouldn't it?
Oh, sure.
And finally, I was so depressed last night thinking about the economy, wars, and jobs, my savings, Social Security, retirement funds, and our bleak future that I called the suicide lifeline and was connected to a call center in Pakistan.
Oh no.
I told them I was suicidal. He got all excited and asked if I could take a private truck.
Oh, that's pretty bad. When you know
Hey,
things are going
like the guy said, it was a tough year. He said, but I made it.
down. That's funny, Winston. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. I hope our viewers enjoyed that.
Yeah.
Funny.
Well, you got, like I say, you got you got to have a little laugh about things, you know. Well, it makes it a whole lot easier to make it through tough times if you can have a good chuckle about it, you know.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
That just made my day. You just raised my vibrations much higher.
Oh yeah, if you can have a little laugh, you know, it makes you feel ever so much better, regardless of what your circumstances are.
Well, and you know the risk of making me laugh. You know there's a risk involved in that, so
Well, like I say, laughter is pretty good fun.
yeah.
It got one time though. Like I say, I went to visit this lady friend in the hospital, and I got her laughing so bad she run me out of there. She said I'm fixing to bust my stitches if you don't stop this. She said you leave and don't come back. You know, so I thought I was doing a good thing, but sometimes it can backfire on you a little bit.
Yeah, well, you know me, sometimes I can't stop, you know, if you get me in a tickle, I don't know, when something's just funny, it's like it's, you know, it just hits you, and you know, I
Yeah,
sometimes I just, you know me, I can't turn it off for a minute. So, but it's good. I usually
yeah,
have.
that's what happens. You know, when I'm looking on the internet, looking at all the different reports, you know, about all the things going on in DC. You know, I can only watch that stuff for an hour or two, and I have to turn over to a comedy channel on the internet. I like this group out of Canada called Just for Laughs. Man, they do some of the funniest things, you know, and it's all just practical joking and stuff like that. But like I say, I can only listen to some of this crap that's going on for so long. Then I got to have a laugh. I got to raise my vibration back up.
Oh, absolutely. And also, our internet looks a little grainy today, and I'm not quite sure why, but we're just doing
Well, we
the
do the
best we
best
can.
we can.
Yep.
Like I say, it's an imperfect world, and we're imperfect people, and so we just do the very best we can. Because, you know, I mean, like I say, you know, you have to operate on hope. You have to operate on faith in our present circumstance. So, you know, that's okay. Like I say, I think people would appreciate the effort, even though we're not Hollywood quality. At the very least, you know, the information that we have to give, you know, may help people. So that's what we're doing it for. Anyway, today, I wanted to concentrate on some of the ways that the various functions in government have been ripping off the people. Now that's soon to be terminated and so forth. But people are not aware of what happens. But before we start that, I wanted to share another book. What had happened was the wife and I were traveling across country, and we got one of those little audio books, you know, where somebody just reads the book. And so I'm, just coasting along. You know, the wife likes to drive, which is fine with me. But anyway, so we were traveling, listening to this audio book, and every once in a while I say, "Stop, pause that," you know, and I writing something down, you know, and go a little bit. I said, "Pause, wait, wait, wait." You know, what was coming out in this audio book was, you know, so important. You know, I thought, well, boy, this is really, you know, an important thing. And then, as it turned out later on, you know, for Christmas, she found the book
Hmm.
and gave it to me for Christmas, and I've read it, you know, several times because of the content. Basically, the storyline was this fella had been in Australia. Certain things had gone wrong in his life, and so he had turned to crime, had been convicted, sent to prison there in Australia. Then he had made a daring escape and eventually got into New Zealand, then made his way to India. And so he's telling about his experiences in India, and he learned from the people in India. He learned certain concepts and stuff that changed his life. And he said, you know, the center of love on the planet is India. He says, you know, the overriding factor among just the common people, because at one point he was actually living in the slums, or, you know, what they call the slums.
Mm-hmm.
And so he got involved in various experiences. Well, in the course of his journey, he made an acquaintance with what we would call a mafia godfather. Now, this fellow was interesting in as much as he was a philosopher, He was a deep thinker. And, you know, on the side, he was studying with a physicist. So this is not your typical, you know,
Sure.
mafia guy you would think about,
Mm.
because his story was that he was from Afghanistan.
Mm.
Because of the wars with the Russians and all those kind of things, he had escaped and come to what people call Bombay, or Mumbai as they call it. And he was running a criminal syndicate to accumulate money to buy weapons to send back to the Afghani rebels, as they called them. So that was his direction that he wanted to go. And so this fella, they call he referred to himself as Lin Baba. And so anyway, it tells about all his experiences. But in the course of dealing with this one mafia boss, and then talking about philosophy of how it was that this fella justified what he was doing. Because in his criminal organization, he would not do anything with drugs, nothing with prostitution, no pornography, no child, trafficking, any of that kind of stuff. And then as he tells why his philosophy is, you'll understand it. And that's why when we were driving along, I have to pause it because I have to write something down, because the things he was saying were so important. You know, I thought I just have to write this idea down. So my point is that many times when you read different books and things, you say, well, this is an interesting story, but then all of a sudden this mafia boss pops up and starts, talking about philosophy of life. I found it to be quite interesting. So anyway, here's the book. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shataram?
Shantaram.
Shantaram, okay.
Uh-huh. And the fellow that wrote it, I mean, this is a fictionalization of his real life. So here's his picture.
Oh, okay. Gregory.
He was a bona fide criminal in Australia. So he tells about his experiences.
What's the last name? We couldn't see it.
His name is Gregory David Roberts. He was born in Melbourne. And this is an actual character, but the experience he had were fictionalized. But I suspect. Go ahead. Okay. Anyway, this is like I say, it's pretty thick, 700 or 800 pages in this novel. But once you start into it, you'll find it hard to put it down. Now, there's certain elements within that, that I would like to refer to, because it goes right into what we want to discuss today. So again, I'll have to read some of the passages because I don't have it on electronic to put it up.
Okay.
Anyway, on page 472, he says, whenever you go into the world, in any society, it is always the same when it comes to questions of justice. Now he's talking about this mafia guy. He says, Lord Abdel Kader Khan, my mafia boss and surrogate father, because they had developed quite a relationship. Anyway, he told me when I'd been 6 months in his service, he says, we concentrate our laws, investigations, prosecutions, and punishments on how much crime is in the sin rather than how much sin is in the crime. Let me repeat that. We concentrate our laws, investigations, prosecutions, and punishments on how much crime is in the sin rather than how much sin is in the crime. Now he's talking about statutes. when he talks about crime prosecution and so forth. And so as he goes through this, we'll get more of a definition on this, but I just wanted to differentiate between the concept of sin, which we know to be, in commercial terms, we call that debt.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, sin denotes some kind of liability which has been created by some action. It means something has to have been done. So again, the question is how much crime is in a sin rather than how much sin is in the crime. So these are opposing concepts. People don't have to think about this because people only think about, well, there's this statute over here. I ran through a stop sign. Okay, there's the crime. The question is how much sin or how much liability or debt was created by me running through a stop sign. Then, of course, the statute and the code has certain penalties affixed to it in monetary terms. Mm. So that's generally what we think about. And then when we start thinking on the common law concepts, well, how much debt was created by me running that stop sign? And for the most part, it's zero.
Right.
But yet the system wants to extract a monetary amount for a debt that does not exist.
Ah, interesting way to describe that.
Exactly.
Like a light just went off, ding, 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 ding.
Oh, yeah. So I'm saying this is a really good book.
Interesting.
So this mafia crime boss, who's running a major syndicate. Mm. He's running. Basically, what he was doing in his crime was he was black marketing currencies. Mm. He's also black marketing gold and also passports and other documents. Mm-hmm. So from his position, as crime boss, because he's not involved in, the drug trade, he's not involved in, human slavery, he's not involved in prostitution or any of those kind of things. So his position as an honorable man is how much debt to anybody is created by what I do. And in his position, in his mind, he was saying, I'm not hurting anybody. And so the only crime that he was involved in was he was liberating money from a governmental system that was simply ripping off the people. So he says, okay, who have I harmed? What man or woman have I harmed by what I'm doing? In other words, how much sin mm-hmm. is in the crime that I'm being accused of? See, there's a difference.
Well, if that money that he was laundering or whatever was, somebody's retirement income, that does hurt.
It wasn't.
Oh, okay. Well, then that's different. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll go into
where the source of his funds, depends on what the source of his funds were. But I get your point. It's a very interesting way of looking at it.
Well, of course. People just look at the crime. They say, well, a crime was committed. Really? Well, who was harmed by it?
Right.
If it's a crime, who got hurt?
Right.
Or, people use the term corpus delicti. Where's the body I ran over when I went through that stop sign?
Well, that was also, you made reference to that before when we talked about the concept of debt, and we talked about, the concept of when a woman, I think it was a biblical reference where, if a woman was being stoned because she committed adultery, it's like, well, where is the harmed party? And if her husband didn't show up to claim he was injured or received the liability, then why would they stone her? Because they've all committed crimes, or they've all committed some sort of
that's pretty much how Jesus shamed all of them,
right?
And it comes back to the question of he who was without sin cast the first stone,
right?
And all of them had to put their stones down,
right?
Because all of them had created debt, not in the same way this lady had, but they were all as guilty. Now this goes back as we get into a little bit further on. Maybe I'll just bring it up right now. And that was, the position that Jesus had taken was he said, don't become an accuser of the brethren. because if you start to study the etymology of the word accuser, it goes right to Satan. Satan is the accuser, before the courts of God or whatever. So Satan comes in and accuses people of this or that and the other. And so Jesus was warning people, don't become like Satan. Don't be accusing people. And this is a concept that was early taught by Joseph Smith, the guy we've talked about. He said, look, he's talking to people because he was all the time being accused of something. He said, if you won't accuse me, he said, I won't accuse you. And he says, if we have no accusers, he says, then we'll go to heaven together. So, the concept of being the accuser. Now, this fellow that wrote this book, this criminal, he was relating some of his experiences in prison. And even though he was seriously treated, beaten and tortured and all kinds of things while he was in prison, he said, our code in prison is we don't rat other people out. And what he was saying was the same concept, which is we don't accuse. And so we'll bear with it, but we will not accuse our tormentors. I mean, see, a lot of people have seen this on TV, I'm not a rat. I'm not going to, rat on somebody. But that's the code they live by. Is that ethical? And that question was asked in this novel. This mafia lord, there was actually a 3 or 4 page discussion with this fella about that very concept. But his position was, well, this is a code. This is an ethic that we have adopted in the prison system. He says, in fact, it's about the only thing we had as a community within the walls of the prison. The only morality that they could rely upon was they would not accuse one another. I mean, they might get stabbed or beat or whatever, but they don't say anything about it, because he said we retain that to ourselves. That's something that cannot be taken from us. So even though you get, have all these problems, so I mean, is that right or wrong? I don't know, but that's just the code that they had adopted. And so they held on to that element of self-empowerment as an ethical moral. Now, again, let's look around in our communities and everything. There's always somebody wanting to accuse somebody of something. Kids come running in, Johnny pulled my pigtails, or somebody stole my marbles. I mean, that's childish. And then if we as adults don't get past that. So it's like in commerce. People say, well, how does the real commercial world handle itself? Well, if some law merchant or some participant in that system does something wrong, the others simply won't do business with them. They don't accuse them. They don't put them in prison or whatever. They simply won't do business with them any longer. I mean, that's the code. That's the moral ethic in the law merchant. So, there must be something to this. I mean, like I say, I'm, this is something for people to investigate, but anyway, on this next little part, which is basically of the black market on currencies, so forth. I just want to read some little parts of it, because this other fella that was a part of the group of this crime syndicate, he was a Palestinian, and he had suffered terribly. And he himself, unlike the mafia boss, this other fellow, he was eaten up with hate. And so there's a very long discussion between this fella. He became known as Shantaram. He had spent some time in one of the villages, and they had given him a name. That name was Shantaram, which means man of peace. Which which you after reading the novel, you would kind of have to wonder, after all the things he participated in, why they would call him a man of peace. But you have to remember, this is India. And he says the overriding factor in India is the concept of love. And one of the concepts that he learned was that sometimes, perhaps even many times, you have to surrender to win. Now, this is pretty much a concept that Jesus taught. When he said you have to go below all things. In other words, you have to surrender in order to, achieve some of these other elements. Anyway, back to the black market on currency. I mean, I know how it works, so I don't. But anyway, there's some portions of the conversation that Lynn Baba was having with this Khaled, who was a Palestinian who was filled with hate. Says people say that money is the root of all evil. Khalid told me when we met in his apartment. His English was rich with accents of New York and Arabic and the Hindi that he spoke reasonably well. But that's not true. It's the other way around. See, so the original proposition of Khalid was, he says, people say that money is the root of all evil. But then he says, but this is not true. He said the other way around. He said money isn't the root of all evil. Evil is the root of all money.
Boom. There you go again, Winston. One of those moments.
Well, think about it for a moment.
Right, sure.
Money is the evidence of what? Debt. All money. I don't care if it's gold or silver or dollar bills or whatever. It's the evidence of debt. And what have we determined the corresponding word to debt is?
Sin.
Sin.
Yeah, exactly.
So this guy is, not altogether off base here. He says there's no such thing as clean money. He said all the money in the world is dirty in some ways because there's no clean way to make it. Make money. You remember we talked about Rand impressed about the Americans because they had come up with a phrase to make money. So this Khalid here, he was saying it's all dirty. He said if you get paid in money, somebody somewhere is suffering for it. Now in our present system, that's true. Because why? Because money is in a limited supply. So everybody is competing for the limited supply. There's not enough money to go around because the banks deem it so. Now with this currency exchange that's coming out, we're fixing to reverse that for the reasons we've talked about.
Right.
It goes on to say that's one of the reasons, I think, why just about everybody, even people who never break the law in any other way, is happy to add a few extra bucks or two to their money on the black market. And then they get into another discussion, about how the black market worked. And I did a little bit of black market work on currencies at one time, back in my younger days when I was in my sinful youth. Like I say, I was a blackjack, a card counter. And what we were doing, because some of the casinos in Reno would give extra for Canadian money. In other words, if you put down $100 Canadian on the blackjack table, you're actually increasing your value by about $5. So when we would go to Reno as a team and play, we'd send somebody ahead to obtain Canadian $100 bills, and they would go around to the various merchants in town. And generally, when we went in, we would take in about 30,000 in Canadian, and then so we were on the initial, play on the blackjack tables. We were always putting out Canadian money, because we knew for every bill we used on the blackjack table, we made $5. So that's pretty much my black market experience with currencies and stuff. But it was legitimate. I mean, the casinos didn't have to give that extra, but they were trying to draw in Canadian customers by giving that extra. So I have a little bit of experience with that. I don't do that anymore, but there was actually quite a bit of money that we made from exchanging Canadian, because we would buy it, from the merchants or whoever at the spot rate, on the exchange. So let's say that we paid 70 US for a Canadian 100. Then we took a casino, we were getting 75. So we're making $5 on every single Canadian $100 bill. That's what it amounted to. So I have a little bit of experience with that, firsthand experience, so forth. But I have since repented.
Very good. You redeemed yourself, Winston.
I redeemed myself.
I'm sure you did.
Now, here's another concept in this book. Like I say, this book is so full of a good, solid philosophy. It's almost unbelievable. Let's see here. Okay. So he's talking about black market. They're having a discussion about the black market versus the white market. The white market would be the government, currency exchanges. So he went through all the ways that they were manipulating, I shouldn't say manipulating, but buying low, selling high, and all these kind of things. So he says, it's all about greed and control. These are the two elements that make for commercial crime. Greed and control. Those are the key words. All right. He said any one of them on its own is not enough. Greed without control or control without greed will not give you a black market. Now, how much black market do we have going on in our country today?
We have.
There is aside from the real criminal stuff with the drugs and all that crap.
Almost all of it.
Yeah.
Almost all of it.
If you took the black market out of the United States, we'd fall flat on our face economically.
I'm sure we would.
So again, greed without control or control without greed won't give you a black market. Men can be greedy for the profit made from, let's say, pastries. But if there isn't strict control on the baking of pastries, there wouldn't be a black market for apple strudel. And the government has very strict controls on the disposal of sewage. But without greed for profit from sewage, there would not be a black market for shit. Well, he's making a point.
He sure is.
Why do you think the mafia controls all the garbage disposal across the country? All right. Then he says, when greed meets control, you get a black market. All right. So again, this is a very, very interesting book. They make some really interesting points.
That's kind of how it really works, though. I mean, for people.
Yeah, he's talking about, control, restriction of currencies and all those kind of things, which the governments do. And the banks do the same thing. And so what he's saying, okay, without the two elements, greed and control, you won't have a black market. Those two elements are necessary to create black market opportunities. That's what he's saying. He said if you take greed away from control, there's no black market. Or if you take control away from greed, there's no black market. So that was what his point was. And I think people think about this for a while, they'll see his point.
Well,
anyway, let's go down to this next one here. We won't go much longer. Like I say, this is a good, interesting book. I really enjoyed reading it several times. Let's see.
Did he write it while he was in prison?
No. Yeah, he did. Actually, he got recaptured and put back in prison in Australia. That's where he wrote this book. I guess he had a lot of free time.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at.
he was kind of going on the Ned Kelly thing. A lot of people know about Ned Kelly in Australia. Anyway, so in his younger days when he was acting stupidly, he was kind of the Ned Kelly kind of character and stuff. He had that kind of. Anyway, so again, they're talking about black market for, in this case, about passports and so forth. So he's carrying on this conversation again with this mafia boss. So again, this boss is saying, so how do you determine how much sin is in any one crime? Who judges that?
Right.
Let me reread this. How do you determine how much sin is in any one crime? Who determines that? And so then he says, sin is a measure of evil. He says, how do you determine how much evil is in any one crime? Who judges the evil in it? He says, if you really want to know about good and evil, he says, we'll have a walk and we'll talk about it. Now, he gets into another concept here because this guy had been studying physics, astrophysics. This mafia boss.
Funny.
Yeah, it's interesting. See, well, let me just, without reading it, let me tell you what his philosophy was, because he talked about the beginning of all things, in the universe, unponderable matter, all these kind of things. And so what he had noticed through his study of physics was that all of nature, as he called it, is moving toward complexity. In other words, in our way of thinking about that, we would say that we are ascending into more and more complex situations. So he's not this mafia guy. He's not talking about dimensions or all kind of things. But what he is saying is that all of nature, or all ponderable matter in the universe, is moving toward more and more complex organization. I mean, so he talks about atoms, molecules, and the things that come from it. Now, what he equated complexity to was good. He said if it's moving toward complexity, he said that's good. Okay, and don't we see the same thing as we try to move towards more complexity as far as dimensions and all those kind of things? And we seem to equate that with goodness. So the inverse of that, what is bad? Well, things that are not moving toward complexity. And so the definition of the word damnation is not moving toward complexity. In other words, if you are like, if you go out here in a stream or a river and you put up a dam, I mean, I think a lot of people have seen dams. And so what are they doing? They're restricting the flow. And so you can equate, if you're not moving toward complexity, if you're not moving toward ascension, then you are damming up your flow.
Ah, brilliant.
And so the word damnation simply just means either not moving forward or not doing anything. And we have way too many people that are not doing anything. So they're under damnation. Damnation. A nation that's damned.
That's it.
And so if we're not in harmony with the universe and moving toward complexity or toward ascension, then we are a nation which is damned.
Ooh.
That kind of make a little sense.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. So anyway, like I say, this is a real interesting book. I mean, it's fun reading. There's a lot of stories, and then eventually this mafia boss, because he's accumulating all this money through the black markets, through the gold and all these different things, which he considers to be low level sin. because of his intent. His intent is to accumulate money to buy weapons to take to his tribe in Afghanistan to resist the Russians. So in his mind, at least, he was justified. And so he did not see very much, if any at all, sin in the crimes he was committing. You see the difference?
Well, it's definitely a discussion of morality. It's kind of like, the everybody's heard this example of, well, what do you know, if your mother was sick and dying and the medicine was too expensive to buy, and the pharmacy had it, and would you stand by, and even though you couldn't, the cure was right here, but you didn't have the money to get the cure, would you stand by and watch your mother die? And most people, it's a moral dilemma question, because what's more important? Where's your moral compass? And it's like, do you stand by and let your loved one die, or do you break the law, steal the medicine, and cure your mother?
Well, in
So
situations like that, there are other alternatives. You go to the pharmacist and tell him, my mother is dying. I don't have money for this particular prescription. Is there any way we can arrange for me to have that? So you put the liability back onto the pharmacist. So the pharmacist at that point would either have the choice not to, or he would exercise mercy. Because if you've done everything you can do,
right.
then are you entitled to grace and mercy? And the answer is yes. And so you would go and say, okay, I can't do it. Or you would put your petition to somebody without actually committing the crime. So the crime is not necessary in
Right.
a situation like that. I mean, that's a shortcut.
Right.
So we like I say, people have to stop and evaluate their own lives. And, like I say, that essay by Ayn Rand was an essay on morality,
Right.
on ethics. What is your code of conduct? How does it measure up? And so every person has to do a self-evaluation to see, how do you stack up? And, the scriptures warn us, never, never let a beggar put up their petition in vain, on the basis that you may be entertaining an angel who is testing you. And so I'm careful of that. I always have some, a few extra bills in my front pocket, so that if I come upon somebody that's, asking for, a handout or whatever, I have it to give. And, like I say, that's good insurance. There's this one particular place down here when I travel south to Oregon. It's a rest stop, and there's always somebody there. Always. It might be a veteran in a wheelchair. It might be, some poor person that's needing, a few extra bucks. But I figured it's good insurance. It's good insurance, to give out a $5 or $10 bill to somebody that's in need.
Absolutely.
It's the best insurance I've ever. I mean, it beats the heck out of those insurance companies. Car insurance and all that kind of stuff. Hey, to give a beggar $5 or $10 is a whole lot better insurance policy. Like I say, I was riding with a fellow one time. We were going somewhere in his pickup truck, and he would not pass a hitchhiker. He would stop, and I think we were going from southern Utah up into Salt Lake City up north somewhere. It was about 300 miles. But before we got too far, we had 4 or 5 guys in the back of the pickup truck. He said, "This is the best insurance that I can get." He said, "If it was just me, would the angels or would God help me out if I got into a fix, an old broken down pickup truck?" He said, if there's 5 or 6 of us in here," he said, "that's good insurance." And he was right. He was right. I mean, these are principles that people don't think about, because in a lot of instances, it's dangerous in some instances to pick up people along the highway that you don't know.
Well,
in his estimation. Yeah.
they
Well,
make
you have
movies.
to judge all those things.
They make movies like the Texas Chainsaw
But how many
Massacre
people?
to
Uh,
deter you
how,
from
how many
picking up hitchhikers.
how many mass murderers or thieves are going to jump in the back of an old pickup truck?
I know
Yeah,
this
I
is
did
the
that one time.
70s.
Like I say, I was coming up out of Vegas. This fellow was hitchhiking. I thought, well, okay. As I stopped, picked him up, he got in the cab of the truck with me. I'm not much afraid of anything. But anyway, this guy had, he'd been a rodeo cowboy there. I think he'd been in Reno, won some prize money, went to Vegas, lost it all, got into a bar fight. So he was trying to hitchhike his way back to Colorado. But I looked at his arm, because he had some wrapping around his hand, where you punch some guy in the mouth or something. Anyway, I could see the veins in his arm. It's summertime, he had on short sleeve shirt, but I could see the blood poisoning going up his veins and arteries in his arm. And I said, "Uh-oh, I got to get him to the hospital, because if that blood poisoning reaches his heart, he's a dead man." And I didn't need a dead man in front of my pickup truck. So I took him straight to the emergency room, and then they fixed him up. And then he called his girlfriend, and so I said, well, she couldn't get all the way from Colorado down into southern Utah. So I said, well, you better come spend the night at my house. So I'm taking this this guy, my wife. So I bring this guy in the house, and the wife would kind of give me the funny looks. Who the heck is this? But
Did Winston pick up today?
But I saved a life.
Yeah.
If he had been left by the side of the road, and nobody had picked him up and seen that blood poisoning moving up his arm, he'd have been dead alongside the highway. So again, I'm very careful. I'm very careful about those kind of things, just from that one experience. But like I say, the best insurance you can get when you're traveling is, hey, stop at some of these rest stops. A lot of times it'll be a veteran in a wheelchair or any kind of thing. And I've always got a 5 or 10 in my front pocket to pass out to people like that. Good insurance. So anyway,
now that you just told everybody on video on YouTube, be careful. You're going to be getting people walking up to you.
Well, that's true.
You're going to be hitting up Winston for 5 or 10.
Well, I'll give it to him if I got it. If I got more money than I'm using, what am I going to do with it? Like I say, well, anyway, I don't want to get off onto me, but my point that I'm trying to make with this novel, again, the concept, that you really need to take away from what we've talked about so far, is how much crime is in the sin, and then how much sin is in the crime. Because in our present justice system, it's all about the crime. It's not about the sin that's associated with what they're calling a crime or a law or statute that's on the books. And I think a lot of people are realizing this. And they're saying, okay, I got a speeding ticket, or I got a ticket for going through a stop sign. Who did I harm? And if I did not harm anyone, why should I give you money to the state? Now we're going to launch into here some of the problems that have developed over the years, again, because of the type of money that we use, because we're operating totally in fiction. That opens up all kinds of opportunities for real crime. And like we had mentioned in some of our previous interviews and stuff, where we talked about fascism, how do you fund a fascist state? The fascist state does not produce anything, so how do they get money to continue on? They do it by theft. They steal. And so, people need to open their eyes and say, hey, what's going on around us? Is this the kind of government? Is this the kind of thing that we want? And if you find out that's not what you want, then steps should be taken to get it changed. Now, we've talked about this concept of the interim government, the changes in government that we're fixing to have. the change in the monetary system and so forth. Well, let me suggest this to all the people in America and all the people on the planet. What good will it do to change a system if you don't have ethics, if you are not a moral man or woman? What good would it do? What good would it do to have Jesus Christ and all the holy angels and the apostles and everything, come down to earth if you can't profit by it? Because your level of morality, your level of ethics and so forth do not coincide with those who would come. And so when we start to talking about, I've spent a lot of time, on several occasions talking about this currency redemption, trying to emphasize to people that you are in fact a steward. It's unearned money.
Right.
And if you're not careful with unearned money and don't act properly as a steward, it will destroy you. It will destroy you.
This is a big test. You could look at it as a
It is a
test.
big test.
Yeah.
And people, you see all kinds of things on the internet stuff, about people, that what they're going to do with this, what they're going to do with that, and all that kind of stuff. And for the most part, I hear good reports. People say, well, we're going to take this and we're going to do this project over here. We got the veterans over here we're going to work with. We got the homeless over here. We got all these things. For the most part, I've heard very good reports from people in regards to these funds and so forth. Now, let's talk about tithing.
Tithing.
Yeah. If you'll go back and, where did the concept of tithe, T-I-T-H-E, that's the word we're talking about. Some people pronounce it differently, but a tithe. If you'll go back to the concept, that's in the Bible, and that is, we come on the planet, we plow, we plant, we reap, all these kind of things. And so God has increased us. In other words, you take one small grain of corn, you go out and plant it, the stalk comes up, you might have as many as 3 years on there, and there might be as many as 600 new kernels of corn from just that one. Okay? So you've had an increase from 1 to, let's say, 600. Okay, that's good. That's good. All right, now, what does the Creator require for increasing you from 1 to 600? See, now that's what's called a tithe. And what the Creator is requiring of those who obtain this increase is a 10th part. A 10th part. Let's call it tithe. That's where the concept of tithing, which is actually a verb, it can be used as a noun. But that's where that concept comes from, is the increase that's given by the Creator. And that's why if you go back in the Old Testament, they always, when somebody planted a field or something like that, they always had a widow's corner or corners. And so they would go out and reap their fields, and then there would be a certain portion, which would probably be 10% of their field that they would not harvest, but they would leave it available for the widows and orphans. It's called the widow's corner. And that's how they were restoring that 10th part, to the Creator, is they would make available to those who, were poor and without a supply of food. Now, so let's translate the concept of the Creator's 10th part into our present. So let's say, for instance, you have some of these currencies that you want to redeem. And so you went to the trouble to get it. You plowed, you sowed, you did all these kind of things. And so you are the sponsor of the increase. In other words, you're the creator. Would it be fair for your use to take a tenth part of that increase for your very own use? And I would have to suggest that would be a moral thing to do. A moral thing to do. Because again, you're acting as a creator and so forth. So again, we have to evaluate. We can rely upon some of the concepts and principles which have existed for thousands of years, perhaps, on the concept of the tenth part.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no objection to that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that makes good, perfect sense to me. And so I think if people would look at it from that point of view, I think you'll be, very well pleased with, whatever it is. And some of you might say, well, 10% of all this, way more I can ever use anyway. And so, like I say, take a good moral look at, what it is you're doing, what things are placed into your care as a steward, and then act accordingly. We're trying to get toward a moral or a morality that would promote us as individuals or as a nation into what we would call the ascension path. And so when we come upon some of these circumstances that we're shortly fixing to experience, we would hope that people would incorporate some of these concepts into what they actually do, because again, these kind of things will either make you or break you, one of the two. So people need to think. You're on mute.
Thanks. Sorry, no, I'm not
That's
feeling well,
okay.
so I had to turn it off for a minute. I can't help but thinking that um, I think it resonates whether it's right or wrong in your own soul. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
I think people do know, like if they think they're taking too much, are you in your head or are you in your heart? And I think if you go with, what's in your heart and you let your heart tell you what's right and what's fair, I think you'll be in a better, position at least with the creator. You know what I
Yeah. Like I say, life is pretty short. We don't have much time, but the outcome of this life,
mean?
what do you want to gain from it? That's the question. And once you determine what it is that you would like to gain from this lifetime, that certainly should dictate or indicate to you how you should
Yeah,
live this life.
exactly.
It don't make any sense, to be immoral, unethical, or whatever. I mean, even in a prison, inside the four walls of a prison, the prisoners developed a certain morality about ratting on one another. And this fellow in this book, what he said was that was something that even though they tortured us, they beat us, they did all this kind of stuff, he said that was something they could not take from us.
Right.
They couldn't take from us the fact that we would not rat one another out.
Uh-huh.
See what I mean?
Yep.
And so it was something they could hold on to. I mean, we're talking about people in a prison that might have been, thieves or robbers or murderers or whatever.
Mm.
But the one thing that could not be taken from them, even by torture or being thrown into, isolation or whatever, the one thing that couldn't be taken from them was the fact that they would not accuse one another, regardless of what they had done to each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, it's something they could hold on to. You see what I mean?
Right.
No, we're not. We're not so much in that kind of circumstance. But it's your morals that you hold on to. That regardless of what happens to you in your life, they can't be taken from you unless you surrender them.
Mm.
Now, you might not agree with the moral concepts of this fellow over here, or you might not agree with the concepts of morality with this woman over here, but you have your own morality, and if you will uphold it, you can build it up, you can lift it up. It's what we call ascension. But hold on to it. And the thing that Jesus said, he said, I would rather that you be hot or cold and not lukewarm. He said, if you're lukewarm, he said, I'll spew you out of my mouth. And so again, we need to hold on to the things, and if you're hot or if you're cold, I mean, he's just using that comparison. But if your morals are not what they should be, at the very least you have them, and you can change those things. But if you have no moral integrity, if you have no ethics, nothing can be done for you. It's what we call, again, damnation, because you're not doing anything. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so people would be well served to do a lot of introspection, just to see just how do I feel about things, what do I do about certain circumstances, how do I treat this person, how do I treat that person, and if you have a morality, stick to it until you find something better. And if you find something better, change, go toward the complexity that this mafia boss was talking about here. Go toward that complexity. And like I say, it's a journey. We're on a journey here. That's, big deal. We're on a journey. But if you do nothing, if you do not move toward complexity or ascension or whatever, at whatever pace you can make it, some people go very, very fast. Other people kind of go, a little bit slow pokey like me and stuff. But anyway, if you do nothing, you have wasted a lifetime. So, I mean, how stupid is that?
Well, it's about soul development. You're still on mute now. It's about soul development too. It's what we're here for. So it's kind of like, what did you come here for? And we might not remember, but we find ourselves in certain situations in life where, oh my God,
yeah,
such a mess. I'm sorry. I'm feeling well today. I feel like it's okay.
You don't need to apologize. Everybody has a sick day or like that. Luckily, for the people who listen to that, you got up off your sick bed to come do this. You can be applauded for it. So you don't need to apologize, not at all. We all have those kind of days and so forth. Now, I wanted to go into some things that people might not know about, and that is the ways that the fascists have stolen. Now, we had talked about in some of our earliest reports about how the birth certificate and all these things were hypothecated upon. Mm-hmm. And, funds were created, accounts were created, and how much the fascist government tried to prevent people from capitalizing on what is rightfully theirs. They have fooled, they have tricked, they have stolen from people. And so we're hoping with this new change in government, this interim government, that all that's going to change under NACCURATE. But again, those operators who are actually operating that system, again, they're coming out of the same system that you and I came out of. What will be their morals in this new situation? Will they upgrade? That is something we have to closely watch, because again, I'm not willing to trade one tyranny for just another tyranny. I'm not willing to do that. And so if I find that, this new system, as we hope, is actually run upon the same concepts and principles as the old government was, we're going to have a problem. We're going to have a problem. And those people who have been entrusted See, when I came on the planet, you know, I was given certain jobs to do because of what talents I brought with me. And so I've tried to do those things. I've tried to honor my contracts, but there's been a lot of others, you know, like me, who've come on the planet who have obviously certain talents and abilities, and so that's what they've contracted to do. Now, if they abide their contract, then we'll have something good. If they don't abide their contracts, let me just tell you flat out, they will be taken off the planet. We've already taken some off. But I'm putting the word out to everybody. If you're in a responsible position, if you've contracted to do these things, and you go into breach of your contract, you will be taken off the planet. And you'll have to go back and face source. We've already done some of this. I mean, you're not going to Guantanamo. You're going off the planet. So that's just a word. I mean, this is notice.
Oh, there you go. That's notice.
This is notice.
Fair enough.
That's exactly right. We're too close to certain astronomical events and so forth that we cannot allow failure. We won't allow it. And I speak with some measure of authority in this matter. We're not going to allow that. So again, like I say, on a grassroots level, each of us needs to look at, you know, our morals, our ethics, to see how we're doing. You judge yourself. I'm not going to judge anybody. I'm not going to accuse anybody, but you'll have to be your own self-evaluator. And if you find that you're, you know, doing pretty good, then keep doing it. You know, keep moving toward that complexity. And if you find out, well, you know, I could probably use a little bit of work over here in this area or that area, well, then do it. Go to work at it, you know, and I think you'll be ever so pleased. Now, again, I'll get off my soapbox. I wanted to expose a couple of things that people, you know, might not be aware of, and I'll send these articles to you, okay, so that you can see them. Here it is. Here's the one I wanted to. Now, this was written. I didn't write this article. The information in it, apparently, the author claims to be an Australian, but I rather suspect he's an expatriate. He's an expat, because he's probably saying, "Well, okay, I'm in Australia," but he's analyzing the system here in the United States. So I rather suspect that he's actually has his training and so forth within the United States system. Now, what this talks about here is a kickback racket, or what he calls bribes, which comes in the form of merit pay and performance award bonuses. Now, let me give you a little example. When I worked on a government job, I was working at the Nevada test site, and they had a little deal that if you suggested something, or if you'd come up with something that would save the government money, then there was a certain little bonus that would come with it. And so people that encouraged people to make improvements about the job, the performance, and all these kind of things. So one day I was a foreman on this job. We were working underground, and so anyway, the general foreman said, "Hey, before you go," he said, we've got a meeting over here with the project manager and all these kind of people. He said they got some kind of problem that they're trying to fix, and they would like for us to attend to see what kind of input we might have into it. Because what it was, basically, they were wanted to construct some things out of nylon I-beams rather than steel. And so, but the problem was, if you start to cut nylon, it was so particulates up in the air, which the health services people were saying was dangerous, and it was. So they were trying to figure out, how they could accomplish this particular project using nylon I-beams for construction rather than steel. And so me and the general foreman went and sat and listened to him for a while, you know, and they were going on about this and what they had to do this, we had to do that, and all this kind of stuff, you know. And they were estimating to solve this particular problem, it was going to cost them $2 million. I think, oh geez. So finally, I jumped into it and said, look, said I can solve that problem for about $20,000. And they said, oh yeah. Now we're talking about college educated people, engineers, and all kinds of stuff, you know, but they didn't have the experience that I'd had, you know, in the real construction world. Because you know they were paper engineers, they were computer engineers, you know. They thought, you know, but you know I was practical. I've been involved in real life construction, so I said, yeah, I can solve that for about 20,000. I said, how you going to do that? I said, you know, if you had any experience with stonemasons or that kind of thing, they have a cutoff saw that injects water into the cut so that there's no dust that comes from, you know, from cutting into cement and stuff. And so I just told them, yeah, I said, if you get one of these cutoff saws, you can cut your nylon beams with this water. The water will trap all the particulates so they don't go into the air, so you don't have to do all this other crazy stuff you're suggesting here that you're saying is going to cost you $2 million to do. So I can solve it for $20,000 because, you know, a good high quality saw like that, you know, you might put, you know, $10,000 or $20,000 into it. So they you know, they kicked it back and forth for a while, and then finally everybody agreed, yeah, we can do that. Yeah, that's the solution to this $2 million problem. Well, guess what I didn't get?
You didn't get a incentive back.
No, you know, I just saved them $2 million, and they weren't willing to give me a, you know, $2.02, you know, for my suggestion and stuff like that. So I told the general foreman, I said, don't you ever take me back into a meeting like that. I said, I'm not solving the problems for them. You know, they're paying me to be a carpenter, not a thinker. I said, so don't take me back to another one of those meetings. I said, I'm not going to give them anything else. You know, just in general, I give them a lot of things, you know, suggestions, you know, from a practical point of view of how things could, you know, work with the construction type work we were doing and stuff. And I finally got tired of it. After that, I just tired. I said, no, I said, don't take me back to something like that again. I said, if they don't appreciate what I give them, I said, I'm not giving them anything more. Let them go ahead and spend $2 million. But anyway, that's just one example of what we call incentives. Now, on this article here, they're not talking about incentives in the real world. They're talking about fabricated incentives and the evil that came from these incentives. Okay, again, go back to what this mafia guy said. You know, how much sin is in the crime? How much crime is in the sin? Yet you need to evaluate those things. So anyway, this article here goes on and says federal non-judicial Form 61 municipal employees, in parentheses, judges, and state non-judicial imposters, officers of the corporation, in parentheses, judges, institutionalized criminal fraud, institutionalized criminal corruption to run a RICO racketeering extortion racket, and your ride to diesel therapy. All right. So his position here, the first part of it is cash awards distort judgment. Under Title V of the United States Code. What's that?
It says cash awards distorts justice.
Yeah.
Judgment. Okay. Justice.
Yeah. So what he's saying here is that for under Title V and other sections of law, he said it wrong. He said other sections of law. That's not true. Other sections of code.
Oh.
It's Title V is United States Code. And where do codes come from? Administrators. Codes do not come from your legislation, folks. Codes come from administrators. So the whole United States Code is administrative in nature. It's not law. It
Oh,
ain't law, not at all.
okay, now we see that connection. Okay.
Yeah.
For those who are, we've talked about this before, but sometimes these little bits of information help to connect some other dots.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay. Sorry. I know, me and Winston both are kind of having our
Yeah.
health challenges today. Okay. Right, because it's an administrative court, and that's why it's an administrative court, because the law is
Yeah. Codes and
code.
statutes
It's
come
law.
from administration, it's not law. First of all, let me tell you what law is.
Mm-hmm.
All law originates in contract. Law is the remedy for breach of contract. That's all that it is.
Right.
And I hear people all the time worshiping the law. The law is, we got to, what's their newest phrase? They keep, rule of law. What in the hell is that?
Yeah.
Rule of law. I keep hearing all of them, getting up. Oh, we got to have the rule of law. We got to go back to the rule of law. I keep saying, what are they talking about? Are they uneducated or what?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, there has to be a contract, there has to be a compact, there has to be a covenant. And if the participants in that contract or covenant go into breach, in other words, if they don't do what they said they would do in that contract, it's called breach. And the stipulations of the contract for breach are what we call law. If there's no contract, there is no such thing as law. All this rambling going on about rule of law and stuff. I just shake my head and say, well, these are really uneducated people. That's what it amounts to. Anyway, let's look at this a little bit closer here. Let me get it so it's all right. Cash awards distorts justice. Yeah. All right. So under Title V of the United States Code and other sections of code cited herein provide for secret cash awards to federal government employees. And I got rooked out of mine. That's what made me so mad. I wouldn't go back to another meeting like that. Anyway, said secret cash awards can be paid to a judge, assistant U.S. attorney, IRS agents, and your attorney, whose first duty is to the court in the performance of successful prosecutions against the American people. Payments to said federal employees are concealed from public scrutiny and therefore constitute bribes, a blatant conflict of interest, and abandonment of judicial neutrality, discrimination, and denial of due process. Okay?
Bingo.
So if the opportunity for cash incentives to a judge are made, the question is their judgment tainted by the opportunity for a cash award for having convicted someone of a crime? That's conflict of interest.
Absolutely.
Absolutely it is. But it goes on all the time. So let's go a little bit further in the article. So I'll send this article to you so you can put it up, so people can look at it. Like I say, I'm not the author of it. This guy lays it out for you here. Anyway, it said it is material facts that together the IRS and prosecution accuses people of crimes and calling said actions deceitful and dishonest means, while at the same time IRS agents, U.S. attorneys, judges, and your attorney can receive secret cash awards which are not condemned by said U.S. attorneys, who themselves receive such secret cash awards as deceitful and dishonest means. These secret cash awards are so secret that neither the defendant, the public, the jury, nor others associated to the original action are permitted by law to scrutinize previous and current secret cash awards to said parties to determine if the promise of cash awards constitutes malfeasance, corruption, bribery, and the perversion of justice in the original action. Remember, I've told you that for all the money that comes in on the court case and stuff like that, the judge gets 30% of it for his retirement. What the hell's up with that? Do you think it's possible to go into any court in the land and get justice as long as something like this exists? No.
That's why they don't like their cases appealed.
Exactly.
Because that can be overturned.
They have to get back the money. If a court judgment is overturned, the prosecutor and the judge have to get back the money they got for these incentives. Really. That's why, I mean, you know, if God himself come down and gave evidence, you know, that somebody was actually innocent of some kind of crime that they've been convicted of and so forth, the prosecution will still say that they were guilty. Every time. Well, I shouldn't say every time, but for the most part. See, because again, it's a money issue with these people. Anyway, then this article goes in and says the presentation of the following statutes demonstrates how it appears that the United States law encourages prosecutorial and judicial conflict of interest, non-neutrality, non-impartiality, and corruption in the federal courts. Oh dear. Anyway, then it goes through the different ones. This one general provision here, payment of $10,000 or a payment of $25,000. Acceptance constitutes agreements by employee. Anyway, what he's saying is here, these secret cash awards that nobody ever hears about, it can be in the amounts of $10,000 to $25,000. The question is, where does the money come from? Well, let me take this one down because we have the question right now. Let me take this. I'll come back to it in a minute. So let me share this other.
Tell you, I guess the wheels turning in there, you know.
Oh yeah,
it's got my wheels turning.
Well, people should be enraged about this.
Yep.
Let me see if I can get this right here.
You're gonna get me riled up now this time, Winston. Usually
I'm sorry.
You all riled up. It's okay.
That's why I'm saying this has to come to an end, because people can't go into any court in the land and get justice for anything as long as the guy sitting up front is getting a cash payment if he convicts you.
Well, I have to say the family court system
same thing.
It's probably one of the biggest rackets because
there's a new element in court in the family courts, and that is the abduction of children. Not just money with them. Anyway, let's look at this. I don't know. I just found this on my computer. I don't know who wrote it, but it's true. It says in the current court system, the court gets a finder's fee directly from the United States Treasury for finding a previously undiscovered asset in the bankruptcy of the United States Corporation in 1933 in the form of perfected bonds written under the Miller Act. I'll go into that in a minute, which is a bid bond, a performance bond, and a reissuance bond. In the United States Treasury website, you will find the SLGS program, and there is a chart that covers 15 days to 40 years. When a case is filed by a bar attorney, the court clerk goes into the United States Treasury back office. That's what we call the federal window. You remember we talked about that?
Yes. In a previous.
And the court gets paid a percentage of the commercial value of the bonds, and then the judge must perfect, which means find you guilty,
right,
or refund the money. Let's just pause for a silent moment.
Let's have a moment of silence now. Let that sink in.
Let's have 5 seconds of silence.
Let that sink in.
Okay, let me reread that. When a case is filed by a bar attorney, the clerk of the court goes to the United States Treasury back window, which I've called the federal window in that respect. And the court gets paid a percentage of the commercial value of the bonds the judge must perfect, which means find you guilty, or refund the money.
What do you
Now,
think they're going to do?
go back to what we had talked about over here in this novel about this fella who is in black marketing currencies. What did he say the two elements were?
Greed
Greed
and control.
and control. Greed and control. Now, so this whole thing we're fixing to go into here with this system and so forth is based upon greed and control. They control the courts, and they are greedy. They don't want to give that money back. They want to keep that money because, again, 30% of it goes into the judge's retirement fund. People in America, wake up. Wake up. All right. You have any questions about that?
No, but people sometimes feel like, oh, well, this doesn't really apply to me until
Oh,
you.
yeah, it does.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You will find yourself in a courtroom one day. And if you file for divorce, if you have child custody issues, you will not leave that courtroom for a long time. I mean, you could get in there. I mean, I've never talked about this on the GoldFish Report, but I've been in litigation for 7 years, and it doesn't end. So I can tell you that they will extort your assets, and this was kind of a very deep rabbit hole I found myself in.
Greed and control.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's let's get back to this incentive. We need to go a little bit further with it. Like I say, I'll send this so you can have it. People that read this are gonna be outraged. I know they are, but what the heck?
But can you imagine, Winston? I mean, just my case as an example. I mean, just without getting into too many details, which I don't talk about because it's still in litigation, but 6 years to get a divorce.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what's going on in that 6 years? You know how much money and legal fees and court filing fees and, um, you know, just not only even the emotional expense that it puts you through, but the amount of money that they're making, hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. I mean, this is for a divorce, people, for a divorce. And the more assets you have, you're going to find out the longer your divorce is going to last. If you can be corruptible. They find the ones who they can exploit and corrupt, who are feeble-minded, that they can manipulate. And then they create this, there was a news report about what they call churning. The lawyers churn the cases.
Yep.
So you have both divorce attorneys know each other. They're friends, they're colleagues. They work together, and they will churn the cases. They will make a deal about splitting the money. And there's a recording that's been published on the GoldFish Report News of undercover record investigation where the police, where the attorneys were recorded undercover talking about how they're going to, they see someone with a seven-figure salary or seven-figure assets or six-figure income, they're going to go back to the Mercedes dealer and get a new car.
Yeah.
And, you don't look at, it's going to cost you everything you have. And I would just go into a divorce knowing that. And you should do everything you possibly can to reconcile without going into a court, because you will get no justice there.
All right.
And they kidnap your children, as Winston was talking about.
Right back here again.
Just
Every
absolute.
time an attorney files something into the court, every time they file something, when a case is filed by a bar attorney, every time, not just the initial pleading. When a case is filed by a bar attorney, the clerk of court goes to the U.S. Treasury back office, and the court gets paid a percentage of that. Where's the money coming from? It's coming from your
Filing
Treasury
fees.
account.
Oh, from your
It was
treasury,
created by
right,
your
right.
birth certificate.
Right, your Treasury Direct account, exactly.
That's exactly what, you know
Stealing
what
from.
happened to all those that was trying to access that,
Right.
Heather girl, lady, you know, they threw her in prison for it. Was she doing anything wrong? How much sin was in the crime? There wasn't any sin in that crime. It wasn't a crime,
But
first of
why
all.
was it a crime? Exactly. That's the whole point.
It wasn't a crime.
Right.
But you remember, you know, back when all that TDA stuff was going on, how I tried to warn people,
Right.
at this level down here you're dealing at, you're going to have problems. When you
Right.
get up to the level of understanding where I understand things,
Right.
I saw nothing wrong with it. But most people are not up here. They're
Right.
down here. And so it has to do with intent.
Hmm.
So that's where a lot of the problem comes in.
It's a racket. It's a huge racket.
Exactly, it's a racket.
And you can't get out of it. I mean, you
Yeah,
can.
you
Winston
can.
Solutions and Commerce. No, this is how I knew Winston. It's how I met Winston, actually.
Well, I don't tell all my secrets. I tell a lot of them. All right, but let's get back to this other one here, the kickback racket. Again, the president may pay a cash award to and incur necessary expense for the honorary recognition of employee who does make suggestions or performs exceptionally meritorious service in the public interest, blah, blah, blah. A presidential award may be given to an agency award under 5 USC 4503. All right, then again, it creates conflict of interest. And then, you know, the agency, the director may appoint and fix the compensation of necessary employees. How about the CIA?
Yeah. I mean, it's a rule, it's a system, it's an administrative system made by the administrators to benefit the administrators, not you, not
Yeah,
me.
one time years ago, it back in, I don't know, maybe the late 70s, I was working on some construction down in southern Utah, and we were building a house for this guy who was a IRS. I don't know what his official title was, but he's way up there. And we were building it up. It was actually up in a little bit farther north. But anyway, I overheard this IRS guy tell, you know, one of his people with him. He said, if the Patriots in St. George knew that I was building this house, he said they would hang me because he'd been stealing money from the
Mm,
Patriots down there. He knew what he was doing.
mm,
He knew exactly what he was doing. And his comment, I overheard him talking about it. He didn't know I was listening to him, I guess. But he told this other guy, he said, if the Patriots in southern Utah knew I was building this house at their expense, he said they would hang me. And he was right too. And I thought, well, man, who could I go down there and tell?
mm.
Anyway, but these things go on all the time.
Yeah, all the time. They extort your assets. They will rob you blind, and you can't do it. You're almost powerless, but there are some remedies, and if you're in that situation, you should go to
Yeah.
solutionsandcommerce.com,
Yeah.
WSICCS, and see what you can find to help to remedy.
Yeah. You know, some of those remedies and so forth, you know, take a little bit
Yeah.
of understanding, a little bit of knowledge.
Mm,
I mean, you know, somebody just walking out in off the streets for the first time would need to build their knowledge base up so that, you know, if you get talking about some of these more difficult complexities,
yeah.
as we call them, that you would be prepared to understand what you're doing, because, you know, a lot of people shoot themselves in the foot
Right.
because they simply don't have the basis to understand what they're doing. So I don't encourage anybody to get into complex matters
Mm,
until they get to the point that they can understand things. So, you know, somebody calls me on the phone,
mm,
says, I got this problem over here. How do I fix it? The first thing I have to do is evaluate them. So I'll talk to them to see what level of knowledge that they're at. And so I may tell one guy one thing, the next guy that comes along, I may tell something else. And again, that you know, what I would tell somebody depends on what they can receive.
right.
And so,
Right.
you know, this one lady sent an email one time, said, Winston's not telling us everything he knows. Of course I'm not. It would injure people.
Yeah, exactly. Because they would try to use something they don't understand how to use and get
Exactly.
themselves into trouble. Exactly.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so again, like I say, on Monday I might tell one guy one thing, and he might call me back in 2 or 3 months, and I might tell him something different. Because in that 2 or 3 months, he may have,
Increased his knowledge on it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was in a conversation on Skype with a guy from Austria,
Mm.
and he was getting onto some of the foundational understandings, and he was trying to accomplish certain things in Austria. But after talking to him for a short period of time, I realized that his basic concepts were incorrect. So the first conversations I had with him, I had to correct
Mm.
his basic understanding of some of the things he was wanting to do. I said, no, that's not exactly right. Let me explain it to you. So the next conversation we had,
Mm-hmm.
was up here. See
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Sure.
And so we run into these things all the time. And so again, for those who might be interested in starting out on this journey, we put together what we would call a beginner's package.
Mm.
And you can go on our products page, or you can call the office and have that explained to you, because some of the basic things would be covered in what we call the beginner's package. And if you don't have those concepts, for God's sakes, don't be up here trying to do this stuff. I mean, I have people all the time come to me and say, well, we got this information from so and so over here, and we did this and this. Oh,
This is graduate level work, study. I mean,
some of it is. Some
yeah,
of
I
it,
mean,
but you got to start. I started
you
someplace.
got to do the undergraduate work first. That's what I
Yeah,
mean. Like,
I
you got to do
started
the
someplace.
101, the 102. You got to do it in that order. You can't just jump to the 400 level courses and level. That's the best way to explain this, Winston, because
Yeah,
you really can't jump to the higher level, which is like graduate level courses, when you haven't done any understudy work. So, got to get that under your foundation.
and I'll be perfectly honest. There's some things that I'll never tell. I mean, I have conversations with people who are on my level of understanding,
Hmm.
and we talk about things I would never
Hmm.
put out publicly. If you got into a private conversation with me and I could see that you're on the level to discuss some of those things, I'd talk about them.
Mm.
But I would certainly never put it out publicly for fear people would get that and say, what in the world was that?
Mm.
I mean, one of my friends, like I say, we were having a little committee meeting to do some projects and whatnot. And so the different ones who were going to participate in that meeting, started to fill in around the table and stuff. And so this one guy who I can talk to
Hmm.
at those levels, we were having a rapid fire discussion because we could conceptualize the things that quickly. And so after a period of time, I looked around the other people at the table, and they were sitting there with their mouth hung open. Did they understand much of what was said? No, they didn't. But it was so astonishing to them that they were awestruck. You see what I mean?
Mm.
And that don't mean Winston's smart. It don't mean none of that. It just means that I have taken the time to understand these concepts, and so I can discuss them at levels with people that generally most people would be lost in the discussion. It's not trying to promote me.
Mm.
I'm just saying. I mean, I just love this Roger Elwick fella. If I'm here, Roger is way up here. I just ever love so much to get into discussion with him about, most of it I don't understand. Most of it I don't understand, but he does. And so, I just love to listen to him. If you get him talking, he'll tell you all kinds of stuff,
Mm.
you know. And but anyway, listen, but my encouragement is for people, to start slow, start small, work your way up, and don't be trying to do stuff unless
Yeah.
you're in an emergency that you don't understand. Anyway, going through this again, talking about the cash awards and all the things, and you can read this.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
People
it
don't
says
stand a chance in this system, and that's this is so. It's really sickening.
Yeah. Now, so these awards include secret cash awards. They're not limited as to the number of awards that may be awarded to any one person or group. Excuse me. So, in other words, $5 or $10 or $25,000 ain't nothing. They could receive many of these same awards. Mm. And so, if your buddy is the guy that's giving out the awards, how much money do you want? Mm. And they'll give it to you because they can. It says any person or group of persons can be awarded this money, including U.S. attorneys, federal judges, the President of the United States, or anyone else for that matter. The awards may be given to the same person or group each minute, each hour, each day, every week, every month, every year, or not at all.
It's just amazing.
In other words, the U.S. government and the alleged Internal Revenue Service, a.k.a. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, have a perfectly legal, not lawful, system of bribery.
That's right.
The bribery works against the American people of the several states of the United States of America when they expect impartial justice, and there is no proof on the record to the contrary because they don't reveal this. The Ethics in Government Act, which is 5 U.S.C. Appendix 101, blah, 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 specifically forbids the disclosure of monies, this bribery system, earned from the federal government. So furthermore,
yeah, really. It's a joke, huh? What a joke on us.
Furthermore, personal financial information is exempt from disclosure under the Privacy Act. Federal judges can thus be paid large sums of money beyond their published salaries authorized by Congress privately and secretly by their employer, the federal government, with a payment statutorily dubbed in this case as incentive awards, also referred to as cash awards.
The Ethics in Government Act forbids disclosure of the
man, they got it covered.
The kickbacks. Yeah, they got it covered already. And if we've been hoodwinked, people, you should be pissed off. I'm telling you right now. I'm sorry, I don't use that language usually, but hell, this is it. This is just the greatest. And they keep us so ignorant of this so that we don't ever get to that level that you're talking about, because they keep this information out of schools, out of universities, out of the general public would have access to it. You'd really have to go on a fishing expedition, which you went on, Winston, and that's how you came about a lot of this information.
Yeah. Anyway, it says the fundamental questions are these. How can a federal judiciary be independent and impartial when the law permits the federal government to privately and secretly award judges up to $25,000 in undisclosed secret cash awards, by the way that they don't report on their taxes, and to privately, secretly, and erroneously overpay them up to $10,000 and waive such erroneous payment? Can anyone be assured of a fair, impartial, and unbiased trial when said cash awards are cloaked in secrecy by the United States law?
Oh, man. No wonder my divorce is taking 7 years. You know how much money they're making off of this case? Holy cow.
Well, let me tell you the following story. Yeah. And again, I'll send you this article so you can put it up. So I'll stop sharing because I know you don't like to talk, that. But anyway.
Yeah. Winston knows he needs to change the subject with me.
Well, a friend of mine who I could talk to at these levels up here, he had a court case going there in England. And he was, he's just fooling around with it. I can't remember what the court case is about now. But he had a court case and it had a particular case number. Okay, so every court case has an account number. It'll say case number, 1, 2, 3, 4, or whatever. So he started doing research on his case number. He found about a half a dozen totally unrelated court cases that were going on using his case number. And he started investigating that, and he told me about it. I said, for God's sakes, stop. I said, you fell right. You walked right into an MI6 operation. I said, back out of it, get away from it. I said, it's just too dangerous. And sure enough, a few months after that, he was murdered. And I'll tell it to you so people will know. MI6 sent through an interdimensional assassin, and he came in and poisoned my friend, poisoned him to death. And as luck would have it, working with some psychics and stuff, I got this interdimensional assassin. I got his name, and I had a friend who, I won't say who it is. Anyway, I have another friend who is a galactic bounty hunter, and I went and told her about it. And I know she got this. Pardon my expression. She got this asshole. She got rid of him. And so, like I say, some of these things are so out of reach to common reasoning and stuff that you really don't know what goes on with some of these things. But I tried to warn him.
Well,
he's just too far into it. He was
yeah.
just too far into it, and they came and killed him.
Well, because they saw that he was inquiring about it, and they once you become because they monitor, I guess they monitor. I don't know how they saw. I don't know how they saw that, but if you start digging deep into things and you start figuring some things out, you signal alarms to certain places and people, and so it's what we're saying is this
like I say, this sounds like a crazy story, but I'm telling you, it's a real story. These are things I've been involved in. These are things I know about. And so we sometimes we're dealing with, in the third dimension, and sometimes we have to go other places and do other things.
Yeah.
But like I say, they were simply using his account number to rip off money, using his straw man account in the United Kingdom. That's what they were doing. And like I say, I told him, I said, man, you need to get away from that. Just leave it alone. But like I say, he probably too deep into it, and they found out about it.
Do you know what?
They did not want exposure.
You know what? I mean, there's probably more to the whole child trafficking and human
Yes,
trafficking
there is.
too, because they are doing the same thing with these social security numbers of these people who are missing, these kids who disappear, people who are trafficked. Yeah, that's sad.
And I've told a story about this fellow I was trying to help a little bit. He was actually a family court judge. And as far as I could tell, he was an honest, honorable man. He was looking for solutions to problems, to help families, and all this kind of stuff, which is great. I mean, I don't think there was anything about this guy that I would criticize. But as a judge, he started to look at where the money was going through family services, child protective services, and he found some things that he was fixing to expose. Right. So what did they do to this judge? They charged him with federal crimes and threw him in prison.
Well, they did that to Senator Nancy Schaefer from Georgia. They killed her. They murdered her. I mean, that's what it's been reported, that she was murdered. Well, she was murdered, but it was like, who did it? So it's because she was exposing the child, I mean, they were literally shopping for children, and
they were.
Yeah, they were shopping by design. I want this age child, this color hair, this color eyes, this kind of, background, this nationality. Yeah, they were doing that, and Nancy Schaefer was killed because she was bringing it to Congress and exposing it, and she had the best of intentions. It's a very bad. It's a very, very bad reality. It's being uncovered. This is all stuff that's coming out in the open. It's all been discussed before. It's public information what Nancy Schaefer was discussing. She even revealed much of it on InfoWars with Alex Jones years ago.
Yeah. There's one more thing. We don't have time to talk about it because we're almost out of time here, but this a lot of people know the name Gene Keating. And Gene done remarkable research into a lot of this. I'll just have to send it to you. People can read it on their own because we don't have time to talk about it now. But he's going into what they call prisoner bonds, the GSA Miller Act bonds. And like I say, this is high level thinking.
High.
Gene is a genius. You know, he's a heck of a lot smarter than I am. Anyway, he done this research. He put this information out. So this is some notes from a workshop that Gene had done some time ago. I mean, probably, 15 or 20 years ago. So I'll send it to you. People can read it at their own leisure. We don't have time to talk about it right now. Like I say, we're kind of running up on time here. But anyway, today I wanted to, number one, emphasize, that if we're going to see a change, if we're going to see correction in our present system, then first, number one, I have to change. I have to do better. We have to do better as people. We have to develop the ethics, the morals, and so forth that would be conducive to ascension. And so I tried to expose, from this novel, some good points that people perhaps had not even thought about. And then we went into some of the corruption, that we have in our present system. And I had emphasized that, if we go into that same corruption with this next interim government, which I don't think will happen, because again, we're going to institute an SAR. So I think many of the problems that have existed. Now, a lot of people have been following all these sealed indictments. There's at this point, there's over 35,000 of them.
Right.
And who's on this?
Huge.
Well, let me explain to you something. When the new interim government took over the IRS, they took their computers and they took their files. The IRS had a file on every single federal and state judge
Ooh.
as to their criminal activities. And the IRS was using those files to extort all the judges so that none of the judges would ever rule against the IRS. But guess who has those files now? Where do you think those 35,000 sealed indictments just all of a sudden sprung up? The guys that did these indictments, they didn't have a whole lot of research to do. They had it all out.
Oh, sorry, we're getting a little bit of interruption on the internet for some reason. Okay, go ahead.
Now, without exposing the source, I trust the source, but I'm not going to expose who told me this. But they have been in a phone conversation with someone who's, actually in Guantanamo Bay. They were in Gitmo, and they're saying, "Yeah, we're jam packed down here. We got plenty of people stuck down here at Gitmo." And he says, for the most part, they are low level, people in this thing. And he says they're singing like canaries.
Yeah. Singing
like canaries.
Sing.
So anyway, there's been a lot of effort expended to correct some of these problems, to get some of these criminals corralled, get them dealt with. Let me put it that way. So we do see the changes. Then there have been some white hats. It got the people of the Pentagon absolutely livid. And so these sealed indictments, as they were, people are expecting those to be unsealed and the rest to start, time here. So a lot of these people that have been the problem are going to find themselves arrested and detained, and they'll just have to use the FEMA courts. There's not enough room to get most. There's not enough room in Leavenworth for all these criminals. 35,000, and like I say, on a lot of those indictments, there are multiple defendants, not just one.
Right.
There are multiple defendants.
Wow.
You remember that one common law criminal indictment who showed that there were 40. defendants on that one criminal indictment. So
Right.
there's going to be a lot of weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth.
Well, this IG report's supposed to, I guess, is that going to get the ball rolling, get the ball started? Because it's really
Well,
supposed to.
again, that's all a part of the previous fascist government. What
Right.
will they do?
Mm.
I mean, everybody goes around, on the internet, on the news, and all this kind of stuff, talk about all this stuff. I don't hear any of those Hannity or any of those people or judges. What's their name? I don't hear any of them talking about the interim government.
No.
Either they don't know about it or they know about it and simply have been told not to report on it.
Yeah. Right. Until,
But
well, Trump has to make, they have to be told that, Winston, like you're right about that, because they have to make an announcement. And Trump, I think, is supposed to make the announcement for that. Is that correct? Is that your
well,
understanding?
what we originally understood
Hmm.
was that the interim government, the Pentagon, or whoever had created about 35 to 40 hours of video that they will broadcast nonstop, around the clock, so that everybody in America can be informed
Mm.
about what has happened and why we're going into the things we're going into.
Hmm.
And so, if they can't get it out on the mainstream media, they'll simply interrupt with the emergency broadcast system because the people will have to be informed.
Right. And the reason the mainstream media, for folks who don't realize it, they're controlled by these same forces. So,
Yeah,
so they don't, they're scripted. I mean, we talked about this in a previous POTUS report, how Serco is responsible for distributing and disseminating
yeah,
exactly what the news is supposed to say. And I've posted in Facebook on our news page, I've posted excerpts of the headlines from probably about 15 different newspapers across the country, and they were almost word for word exactly the same. So it's
yeah.
not, yeah, it's scripted. So just know
Of
that.
course, it's scripted.
Yeah.
Now, for our listeners, will you need to spend 35 or 40 hours listening to all these videos and stuff? I wouldn't think so. I mean, I'm not going to. I mean, I'll probably be, sitting out in the sun reading a novel or something while this is going on.
Hmm.
I already know all this stuff.
Yeah.
We've been reporting on a lot of this stuff on GoldFish. And this report today, again, with this bribery racket they got going on, these things, we've known about for years and years and years and years. We just haven't been able to do anything of a national correction. So now, hopefully, with this interim government, we'll have the corrections that we need to go into, a little bit better circumstance so that people will be freed to
Well,
go and live their lives and
right.
ascend at whatever speed
Mm.
that they can as they move towards the complexity that
Okay.
was talked about by this
A
in
mafia.
this. It's
Yeah.
it's a real good novel. Let me show it again so that people. I mean, it's a heck of a book.
Oh, yeah.
It's called Shantaram,
Mm. Interesting. I'll
and
put
here's
that.
the fellow that wrote it.
Yeah.
And his name is Gregory David Roberts.
Yeah.
Here's the uh, barcode.
Oh, the ISBN number. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can find it easily.
Okay. I
It's a
got it.
heck of a book. I've read. I mean, about every year or two, I read it again.
Mm. Interesting.
First off, it gives you. I mean, aside from all this crime and stuff we're talking about here, it gives you a beautiful, beautiful description of love.
Oh.
I mean, some of the things, some of the situations and circumstances that come up will actually bring tears to your eyes
Mm.
because of the love that's demonstrated, and then the characters and what happens to them, and the love interest and the different things that go on. I mean, it's a heck of a novel. It will keep you intrigued.
Mm.
Anyway, it's so there it is. I just wanted to expose that book because, but I mean, aside from the novel itself, the elements in there that we are dealing with right now in our particular situation, to give people the idea, the difference between, how much crime is in the sin and how much sin is in the crime.
Mm.
People need to think about that because as we start talking about, well, we're going to go back to common law. most people ain't got the slightest idea what that is.
Right.
I keep hearing, people yammering about this and yammering about that and all this kind of stuff. And then these yahoos get on here and start using the rule of law. We got to go back to the rule of law. And they ain't got the slightest damned idea what law is in the first place.
Right.
Give me a break. Anyway, okay, I'll try to be
I'm getting
kinder.
riled up. We're getting riled up to Friday, Winston. It's a
Kinder
Friday.
and more pleasant in my conversation here.
I do have a question though, Winston, and
Yeah.
I'm sure like other viewers, our viewers might be having the same question is, so they created a legal system of bribery. Who are they exactly? Who created it?
The administrators.
Well, who do they
It's
represent?
it's from the agencies. It didn't come from Congress.
Like, who's behind it?
The deep state.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
The shadow government, whatever you want to call them. But it's those who constitute the administration of government who are not elected, but who have a job for 20 or 30 years. They're the ones that did
bureaucrats. Yeah, the bureaucrats. Okay. But there's behind that is really more of a, I think we'll get to this, defining, really putting in more definition who President Kennedy was talking about in his 1961 speech, and this is who they are.
Yeah.
Warning us about.
Eisenhower knew about it.
Yeah. And they tried to warn us about the military-industrial complex that was really started after World War II.
There are several conditions which have contributed to it. Mm-hmm. For instance, we talk about the secret space program being involved in the mortgage foreclosure industry as funding for the secret space program. Mm-hmm. Now we're talking about, individuals in that program who could get meritorious money in unlimited amounts, and so they're simply funneling the money from the people into some of these programs, which we would probably support if we knew about it anyway. In other words, if there really is a threat, and there really is a threat, would the people support it financially if they knew about it? And the answer is yes, they probably. I certainly would. If there's a real threat that we need to develop technology to defend the planet, I would certainly support it. Mm. But where you have secrecy, and you have no accounting for the money that's being spent on some of these operations.
$21 trillion lost.
There's where the corruption comes in.
Right.
I think, I've talked to Randy about his experiences. I listened to some of these others, some of their experiences and stuff they had, that if these things were known about generally by the public, we would not have the abuses that have been heaped upon the people. And so we could stop all this human trafficking and slavery and all the rest of this crap. Please, all these secret things, where instead of having a space program that would be productive, now we have all these other problems that we have to deal with. I mean, I think Corey Goode talked about this, Gustav, or this crazy guy was. Let's look at all the abuses, overrides. I mean, instead of the Pentagon, paying $10 for a good hammer, they're paying $300 or $400 for the same stupid hammer. Right. Give me a break. Why not tell the people? Here's what we're facing. Here's what's really going on. Well, the people can't stand the truth. Well, they can't stand the lie either now, can they?
No.
Look how they rip people off. And I can't, in my wildest imagination, believe that's going to lead to a good end. I really don't. So anyway, luckily we have exposure, we have disclosure, and it's not about, disclosure is not about these things flying around the planet. Disclosure about it is the corruption that has been perpetrated on the people on the planet by these programs. And people are going to have to, stand for it. They're going to have to account for what they've done.
Right.
And this Earth Alliance, that's one of the things they were afraid of, that if it was exposed what they had been involved in. So there was a certain amount of amnesty that was granted to that group. And they have started to work for the benefit of the people on the planet now, instead of being some kind of secret program, Nazi outfit.
Yeah, the Nazis that did it. Okay, well, and those are the neocons who subverted our Constitution. So, thank you so much, Winston. I appreciate everything that you shared with us today, and I hope folks watch this and listen to it, and we'll post this. I'll have the article posted on the Goldfish Report website. Folks, please remember to visit our website because you can only access the POTUS reports on YouTube through our website, although they're all available on BitChute. So if you go to the BitChute page, you have to type in the Goldfish Report in order to get to our BitChute page. But all the reports are posted there. YouTube does censor it, but please remember to subscribe because we want to invite all of our subscribers back who we lost when I'm sorry, Google is the parent, but when YouTube deleted our channel. So we'd love to see all of our subscribers return, and that would be wonderful. Because, I really miss the interaction with the viewers on YouTube who would
Yeah.
comment, and it was like we were getting to know each other, and I was getting to know them, and every week it was really beautiful, and that's why we're doing it. We're doing it for you. So as we know this, we don't need to share this, but we feel obligated. We feel a duty to share this with our viewers. So that's why we do it. So please, come back to our YouTube channel. You have to go to the Goldfish Report when you search on YouTube for the Goldfish Report. You have to go to where there's that circle and it says subscribers, number of subscribers next to it. That indicates it's our home page. Okay, and I just want to let you know, if you're viewing this and you're getting commercials, then this is not the original recording of this report because we don't monetize the channel, so we didn't want commercial interruptions. So it's okay that people are copying this and spreading it, but please don't use the Goldfish Report name for your channel because that's our name for our channel. But we're happy that you're spreading it because that's what it's about. So please do spread it far and wide. But you can watch it without commercial interruption from our original page, our original home channel on the Goldfish Report and on BitChute. So if you are seeing this with commercials, this is not the original. And so please come to our original page and subscribe to us as well. So we just want to thank all of our viewers. I want to thank, with all my heart, from the bottom of my heart, all the wonderful people who contribute stories and, of course, who make their donations, who are patrons on Patreon, and, of course, our Starseed, John. Couldn't do this without you, and I'm very grateful. And, of course, our other Starseed, Mike, and all these wonderful people who send and support to Goldfish Report. Thank you so much with all of my heart. But we're all a team in this, Winston, aren't we?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll give a little name to that. Maybe you and I should discuss a certain number. If we reach a certain number of subscribers and so forth, I will do ham bone for the audience.
Oh my God. All right. What's the number going to be? Are we going to get
We'll
back
have,
up
we'll,
to 10,000? Get back up?
we'll have to think about it. I'm willing, as an incentive, to promise to do ham bone
Whoa.
live on the air. We'll have to figure out what that level is, but as an incentive to people to subscribe. If you want to see me do ham bone,
Oh my God,
then
that's so funny. That's great, Winston. Yeah, some incentive there. So I want to get back to our 12,000. I want to go past that, but I'd like to get our 12,000 subscribers back, and I'd like to go past that. So if we can get to our 12,000 mark where we left off, I think that's a good number, don't you?
well, I don't know. It might not go that high, but
Okay.
like I say, if we get enough, we'll have to figure out some level. But if it gets to a certain level, then I promise to demonstrate ham bone.
And after Winston demonstrates ham bone, if our viewers also have a little ham bone video they'd like to share, I would share it on a Goldfish Report. So
Yeah.
you can send that to us on our Facebook page or via email. At thegoldfishreport.com. So send us your ham bone too. But we want to see Winston do his, so because he's the Grand Master now. So
That's right.
I
That's
know.
right.
So, Winston, thank you. Have a great weekend. We'll see everyone else back next week we'll see everyone on Monday for another POTUS report. We have other interviews coming up. We had to reschedule one this week because I was sick. So we will get back to that next week, I hope. And we will, of course, be back next week with another edition of Country Roads. And just wait and see what we have for you next time. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Winston.
Okay, we'll
Stay
sign
there.
off for now. So I hope everybody's enjoyed this. Like I say, we're just trying to help people out with knowledge and information they might find useful. Like I say, I'm not an authority on anything. I'm just trying to put thoughts into people's minds that they can go do further investigation.
Right. So, folks, this is public information, but it's for you. So thank you for viewing, and this concludes this edition of the GoldFish Report.